Now, here's more of the Mike Buck Show on AM 690 and FM 94.3. The Answer.
Okay, so let me take a look at this calendar. Oh, it's Monday. It happens to be the last Monday of the month, or kind of, and it's time to talk story with the Choo Choo. As you know, HART Beat, we've been doing this every other week for months, and it's going to continue. We really love the opportunity that we have to spend with Andy Robbins. He, of course, is the executive director and CEO, and been very candid with us since day one. There's no question that he won't take on. There's no a situation that he won't comment about. If you'd like to know something specific that we're not talking about yet during this segment, call us up. It's toll-free, 1-833-296-8255. That's 1-833-296-8255. And, of course, the other thing you can do is jump on the email, themikebuckshow@gmail.com, themikebuckshow@gmail.com. Okay, you may have seen over the last several days a motion being put forward by, I guess a bill or a rule or something being put forward by Ikaika Anderson, the chair of the city council. And it was, and we're going to get into that a little later on. We're going to get into it a little bit right now, just because I'd like to know what it is. And apparently he's putting forward a motion or something to dissolve HART as we know it and create another city department or commissioner panel that will answer to the mayor about the remainder of the construction and then the, I guess, operation of HART. Boy, that's a pretty long way to get you introduced, my friend. But good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Good morning.
Were you surprised at this? Have you had a chance to take a look at what Ikaika Anderson is looking for, and what do you think?
Yeah, I was a bit surprised. Late Friday, towards the end of the day, is when I first became aware of it, and it's a
great way to get into the weekend, right?
Yeah. It's a draft resolution at this point. We understand that he may introduce it today.
Yeah. Isn't it so that, and we've explained this for a long time, that HART's job is to get this thing built?
That's right.
And that's what you're doing.
Right. So in the revision to the city charter in 2016, which was voted on by the public, the responsibility to plan, build, and make ready for operations is HART's. What changed in 2016 was the actual operations and maintenance, the running of the rail, reverted back to the city. What this resolution would do, first of all, it has to pass city council with a supermajority of 6.
Right.
Then it has to go
6 and 3. It's got to be.
Right. Then it would have to go for a city charter amendment. I understand in November of 2020.
Wouldn't that be what was he talking about going on the ballot?
It would have to go on the ballot, right. And then if that passed at that point, then the responsibility to finish the construction to Ala Moana would fall back into the city under the Department of Transportation
But
Services.
Don't you actually, as the CEO and executive director of HART right now, put on the blinders and just keep doing your job?
There's no question about that. We have to keep moving. This is not for sure. And even if it were to pass all those steps, it wouldn't really take effect until 2021.
Yeah, and that being said, there's an awful lot of stuff going on between now and then, right?
Yeah, including...
Hard to say, hey, wait a minute, we can just stop while you guys think this over? I don't think so.
No, including the operations of the first 10 miles. We plan to have that ready to go next fall.
And so that would be prior to the election.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, look, we can get into that. We can talk about it. But one of the things that I am most impressed with, and this is kudos to not just you, but everybody in the department and everybody in any department, any branch of government or whatever, that actually goes to a neighborhood, sometimes expecting challenging situation, is going out there. It looks to me as though you're not only living up with your mandate, but you can share with us some of the things you're learning when you do these get-togethers. And from what I understand, there's more coming.
Right. So we were in Pearl Ridge last week doing what we call a town hall. We haven't done those in a while. We're out in the community a lot, but a formal town hall community meeting we haven't done for a while. So we had the first one last week. We're going to do another one tomorrow in the Salt Lake area, and we can give more information on that. But it was a chance to provide a lot of information to the community and get their feedback.
From what I understand, the P3, which a lot of people don't understand, is some of the stuff that gets discussed. In other words, are people feeling a little bit more relieved when they find out, hey, it's not all the taxpayer? There's people that are looking at it as an opportunity, and if it's an opportunity, it might be good.
Right. So for the P3 public-private partnership, that relates to our procurement for the city center portion of the project, and as well as Pearl Highlands, where we're building a garage and transit center. And we explained what the methodology is all about, what the benefits are, and things like that. So we were able to communicate that.
You know, gang, herein lies the thing that I like, because obviously going to some of these meetings, preparing for it, and you have an agenda. But from what I understand from some of the callers that we've had, is that the folks answering the questions were willing to change the direction of the conversation to address somebody's concern that they weren't talking about.
Right. So I was there, but in addition to myself and Bill Brennan and some of the people that are out in the community a lot, we brought our subject matter experts. So the actual engineers, managers that are involved day to day in these issues.
I'm glad you said that, because I do know that there's nothing worse when somebody says, let me go back and get back to you on that.
Yeah. We try not to do that.
Yeah, because that doesn't work too well.
Yeah.
You got to bring your A game to these things.
Exactly. I mean, if we don't know something
what is it,
off the top of our head, we'll get back, but we try to have the answers available right there.
You know, gang, and let's say we know this is going to be some controversial stuff. I mean, you know, and you can't just say, well, I'll have a few cocktails and loosen up before I go to this thing, because you got to bring your A game. Yeah. But are you also grateful that people actually do come up, whether they have something negative to say or not?
Absolutely. We had about 100 people there, so it was great. We had all of these displays. We set up what we call hubs, which were, you know, information on transit-oriented development, on the technology, on the routes, and we had all the subject matter experts.
You could go to the whatever table or whatever counter you wanted and talk about your specific interest.
In addition to a formal presentation and a question and answer period, we did all of that.
Yeah, and gang, sometimes, you know, when I invite you to attend the Western Pacific Regional Fishery Management Council's Fishers Forums, it's the same thing. You know, you have an agenda, but you also have a breakout, and the breakout is when people really come. I think, Andy, and maybe you can give us some feedback on what it's been like after these things, when somebody says, hey, you know what? I had no idea that it was going to be this and that. Doesn't that sort of make your day when you go to these things and they come out well?
The very first question, a woman stood up and said, this was really informative and a lot of good news. Yeah. Why don't I hear this in the media?
Yeah, well, it's not only that, but here's the other thing, and that's why we try our best to provide this information. When you're in, you're on. And, you know, I mean, if you're doing something, I want to get you on the air and talk about it. But what I'm thinking is that a lot of those people went home, it's like the pebble in the pond, and say, you know what? You should have come to that meeting, because you've been whining about this all this time. Here's what their answer was.
Yeah, and some basic information that we're going to open the first 10 miles out west next fall. Yeah. Not everybody's aware of that. The fact that we've been on budget for 2 years now. Not everybody's aware of that. And then we're able to communicate things like the transit art program. Yeah. You know, that's something people can't really see right now.
Yeah, you see that right now. Yeah, that's going to come later.
I think it's going to be really something special when people really see the artwork and the storytelling that's embedded in the artwork.
I was talking to a couple of friends of mine that are teachers out in my neck of the woods, who can't wait for the opportunity to bring their class on a road trip, on an outing, to see the rail, because all they've heard is people whining about it. Right. For 3 or 4 years. They don't see it. They've never had a chance to go knock on it. And the people that are already out there, they do, don't they?
Right.
On a regular basis.
Right. We did have a school group come out to our rail center not too long ago, and I think the children really enjoyed being there. I know they enjoyed the snacks that we gave them. But.
Hey, we're a feed me society, right? I'll follow you anywhere. You got a musubi? It's 7:15. Andy and I will be back after we check on traffic, speaking about traffic with Tyzo Braden, and particularly about some of the other things that are going on that you have no clue about yet.
Have you got a question? Want the answer? It's right here and right now. Here's more of the Mike Buck Show on AM 690 and FM 94.3. The Answer.
Okay, so I get sometimes off the air to clear up stuff that's on the air. And it's like somebody said earlier, make sure to ask the HART guys about all that relocation money that got swindled. Well, it turns out that it was swindled, but it wasn't to do with HART. And it was long before Andy Robbins got here, and that was this dilemma of of accusations about what went on the Eva Beach relocation of a whole bunch of people, the Eva plane anyway. Anyway, that's not what we're discussing here, but since it did get brought up, I do know that there is always, and you can please share based on your past experience about this, when you go in like you're doing and building into something that's already there, there's some condemnation and some things that have to be, people have to give up their property. Who determines who that is, number one, and number two, how they get paid for it?
Right. So we have an engineering department that comes up with the maps in terms of what the right-of-way needs are.
Where you got to go, right?
Where we got to go. And then we have to follow a very strict federal process in terms of acquiring property and relocating people and businesses.
I gotta make sure everybody understands. Out in our neck of the woods, we have Kalanian only highway, and as it's been widened over the years, people had to give up parts of their yard. Right. But it was there in the beginning. It was like, okay, there's an easement over your property that, quote, someday might be used. Of course, you got your fingers crossed that someday it's never going to come, but it does sometimes.
Yeah.
Is that the case in some of these?
Well, we often require easements, and in other cases, we have to acquire property. Yeah.
We know about easements and things, and you can address this for utilities and for sewers and for all of this stuff. Right. Isn't that some of the very stuff that you had to deal with, particularly on Dillingham?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's numerous utilities that we need to relocate to get out of the way for our construction of our guideway and stations. And we have to deal with that on a regular basis.
I was going to say, isn't that? Yeah. And there's not supposed to be too many surprise when you do that, right?
Right.
And yet every now and again somebody says, we're not sure exactly what that pipe is or whose it is. What do you do when that happens?
Yeah.
Well, take a chance, cut them? No, I don't know. You can do that.
It's a major effort. And, we have to do a lot of exploration before we start cutting things.
What happens, just excuse me because I'm not an engineer or a contractor, thank goodness, is that I'm guessing that in certain cases, when we have to revisit digging up the street there someday, then what also another thing has to be considered, hey, don't forget that's really close to one of the rail columns. You can't just dig into there.
That's right. Well, what we're doing, especially along Dillingham into Kaka'ako, is we decided to advance the utility relocation work under our direction.
Okay.
And then once that work is complete,
how do you do that? Do you pull them all and say, what do you guys got coming up in the next 20 years?
Well, what we've done is a lot of exploration in terms of looking at old maps, doing the engineering, and then we've even done sort of this audio frequency detection technology to see where pipes are and see if they're where they're supposed to be. And in some cases, they're not. And
I was going to say, that happened in my neighborhood when the gas company came in to install some people on city gas when the pipes weren't where they said they were. You can't blame the crew. They have to dig up the whole street. Hey, where's the pipe? I don't know. Just keep digging. You'll find it sooner or later.
Right. So we formulated a contract that we're underway with right now in our city center section, which includes Dillingham, Kaka'ako, downtown.
I got to tell you something. Yeah. Somebody just said there's that one number to call. That's really true, and this comes up on our Fix It Friday show a lot. When you're going to dig in your yard, you better be sure that where you got to call, because you're saying is there are utility and other easements in our home properties. Not just our city buildings.
Very likely, yeah.
Okay, so where are we on the Dillingham thing? Because I do know that a lot of stuff has to be physically relocated.
Right. So we're working very hard right now on finalizing all of the strategies in terms of relocating the utilities. We've already started. We've acquired certain easements. We've cleared some property along the right-of-way. And we'll be starting major work probably in September in terms of moving the utilities. So a lot of the overhead power lines that you see will have to actually come down
which is actually a blessing in many ways.
I think when we're done, it's going to really clean. It's going to make the streetscape a lot nicer when we're done.
Yeah.
But you can't turn off the power line until you have the new one up and running. So
Tracy in Pearl City says, you know what? This rail doesn't look so bad now that it's done in my neck of the woods. Thank you, Tracy. That probably makes your day, doesn't it?
We've heard that. For 2 lanes of rail, the guideway is about 25 to 30 feet wide.
Yeah.
And you compare that to the Nimitz Viaduct, for example, which is something like 150 foot wide. I think that's what people are seeing. Yeah. It's not that as wide as like a Nimitz Viaduct.
Yeah. I actually got to tell you, I saw a cartoon the other day, and I thought, I wonder if Andy's seen this or someone who's like it in other places. And this is where I guess the two different parts of the project were coming together. and they were like 10 feet off.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
yeah, that's
this is not a good thing, right?
No,
but isn't that a typical cartoon? That
you see that in other projects as well.
I think that we had a little bit of that, and I'm sure anecdotally you've heard about that along the Nimitz Viaduct. I think that there was some problems, that there were things that if they hadn't caught them in time would pass each other in the middle of the night.
Right. There should be no excuse in this day and age with GPS technologies. And
would you explain that? I mean, as you know, this is not your first rodeo. You've done this a lot on both sides as a contractor and as in the capacity that you're doing right now. Talk about how interesting the engineering and that stuff is to make these things work the way they do.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes you have to invent technologies, but in our case, most of it is proven technology. So if you drive along Kamehameha Highway today in front of the Navy, Pearl Harbor, you'll see fascinating technology at work where we're erecting the guideway according to the segmental bridge construction. So these 10-foot wide segments, which are cast out in Campbell,
I was going to say, aren't they made over there and brought over here, and then you bolt them in, and they're supposed to work, right?
Well, they're not bolted in. They're they're hoisted by this big launching gantry.
Yeah. Unbelievable, isn't it?
And then they're actually epoxied together, and then we pull tensioning cables through them to post-tension the whole guideway together.
You make it sound so simple, but it's not that simple, is it?
Well,
for you guys it is.
I mean, it's proven technology at this point, and they can do it very systematically, But the nice thing is, once the foundations and the columns are in place, we can maintain traffic while this major construction is happening overhead.
Here's one that says, so you're going out and doing presentations. If you have an organization or a company or a church that wants a presentation, can they get one? Hey, Bill Brennan, you come in and ask that, because I do know that that's what a lot of what you do is make sure that these folks have an opportunity. How do you do that? How do you go out and reach out if somebody wants to have a meeting or a speaker?
Yes, I just like this. We have a speakers bureau. Sometimes Andy goes, sometimes I go, sometimes other subject matter experts, as Andy explained, go. Depends on the group and what they're looking for. But yes, if they email us at info@honolulutransit.org.
Info@honolulutransit.org.
Yes.
Okay.
Then just tell us your organization, how many people, what days work for you. We'll work with your schedule and ours to provide speakers. It's something we do a lot of. We talk to Rotary clubs.
Yeah, I knew that you did that, because a lot of our Rotarians have called and said, hey, you know what? We learned so much. You ought to invite these guys on. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I gave a presentation last week to a group called the Newcomers of Honolulu, which was a great opportunity, and that's how we look at it. These are all opportunities for us to present some information about the project and, more importantly, to answer their questions.
Hey, you know what? I'm sure you remember this from small kid days. In our neighborhoods as we were growing up, and Bill and I have history. We go back way too long, because we've been doing this for a long time. But I remember when there used to be in certain neighborhoods a welcoming committee for new people.
Yes.
When the Brown's house sold, in comes the people. They bring mango bread and they bring papayas and they bring what they grow, and they say, you know what, you got coconuts, and usually we get some of your coconuts and stuff. Doesn't that ground people?
Yes, it does. It does. And as Andy said, people, they don't know a lot through the media.
Yeah.
And so this is our opportunity to present them the information that they do want to know. And, a lot of it has to do with, now that we're close to going into operation next year, how do I, where's my station?
Exactly.
Where's my holo card?
Yeah, and that's another question, and feed right into that. And thanks, Bill. But that's another question, Andy, that wants to know, how soon are the holo cards going to be in effect? Aren't they already?
They are. You can use it on the bus right now.
Yeah. So, I guess that everybody along with that says, okay, but how much is it? How much is the train going to be? Can you explain once again, because I know you've done this 10 million times, who decides how much it's going to be? Because I know it's not HART.
Right. So the city has formed a rate commission that is meeting now. They're having a series of public hearings to get public input, and they will formulate a strategy for what the rates will be to use the rail. Whether it's similar to the bus in terms of the daily ticket, the monthly pass, senior pass, those kind of things.
I'd feel good if I had that card in my wallet already, and someday I can use it. Right. I do know that it's going to be like a lot of other a lot of other technology now. You can charge it up, and you can, you
right.
get it extended. You're not going to get on the thing and not have it work. You'll be able to get it to work.
Right. It's what we call a smart card. It's account based, so you set up an account under your name,
Yeah.
and then you can load value onto the card and use it for the bus and the rail.
I've heard one guy said that it should be hooked up to a phone call that says, "Hooey, this is your ante. The card's getting. You need to put more money on your card." At 7:30, it's Heart to Heart. It's the HART Beat. Andy Robbins, actually, Bill Brennan. We're all here.
Want to join the conversation? Call us toll free. It's 1-833-296-TALK. That's 1-833-296-8255. Now, here's more of the Mike Buck Show on AM 690 and FM 94.3. The Answer.
Yep, today's the day to go to that mall shopping. Don't forget your helmet. Some of these sales get pretty serious. I didn't realize that shopping was supposed to be a contact sport, but it is in some areas. And on that subject, it is true, and we have lots and lots of examples of controversy and quarrels going on, but we're here in Hawaii. It certainly is a lot less than it is in other places, and that's why, in many respects, we're blessed at having the opportunity of talking to everybody on all sides of these issues. And one of the things that we've been doing for a long time now is every couple of weeks we sit down with HART. We call this program HART Beat, and today, as usual, our driver from HART is the head guy. He's the executive director and CEO, Andy Robbins. And one of the first things I asked him coming in the door today was, "Hey, have you had a chance to take a look over what City Council Chair Ikaika Anderson is proposing towards the dissolution of your office?" Which means, I guess, and you've told me this before, I think that in your job, and this is no matter where in the world it is, you have to have a lot of WD-40 for the wheels of your desk because things change a lot. First of all, what have you heard about what the councilman or council chair is doing? What do you think is going on here?
Well, HART was set up as a semi-autonomous authority as part of the city.
What does that? What does that mean when you say semi-autonomous? Define that.
So there's an executive director, myself in this case, who reports to a board of directors.
Okay.
That are appointed by, 3 of the members are appointed by the council, 3 by the mayor. There's the director of transportation services.
That's where they come from. That's where the council comes from.
So many of them are all city either appointees or employees. So it's kind of a governance model where it's not directly governed by the city council or the mayor, for that matter. It's governed by a board of directors who are appointed largely by them. And I think part of that is because there's so many issues that come up on a mega project like this, and we have a board that has either professional experience in construction or law or finance. Yeah,
that was a question. Somebody said, "How are these members selected based on, I guess, what they're going to contribute to the board?"
Their qualifications and their life experiences in these particular fields that relate to the REL. So that was the governance model set up. And as I understand the proposed resolution, the idea is to make it more directly overseen by the city itself. Yeah.
Okay, so now, however, the expression, it's sometimes very difficult or hard or impossible to change horses in midstream. I mean, what you've gone is you have a job description yourself right this minute to get this job done.
Right.
And so that's where you got to keep going no matter what.
Right. And I'm not really in a position to comment on the resolution itself. Our board of directors will decide whether they want to support or not support the resolution if it, in fact, is introduced. But
that's the other side of it. That's what I wanted to make sure people get. And that is what you come up with all of this collected, combined expertise that sits among these board members who, by the way, are not overpaid.
Right, they're volunteers.
But and there's another thing, gang. I want you to understand this, and you know how I was going into this thing in the very beginning. I was opposed to this particular method of mass transit. I knew that we needed mass transit, but I was not convinced that this was the way to go at that time. I must tell you that many of the misconceptions that I had were based on what information was distributed, and particularly when I found out. I think you might remember I complained about the exorbitant fees being paid to some of these experts that were being brought in here. And then you explained the reason why this is because these jobs are short-lived. And if you want somebody with a lot of expertise, you've got to pay them because they know that they're going to come in and they're going to go out, and their next job is not guaranteed.
And they're not necessarily here, so they're either in New York or Pennsylvania or Singapore for that matter. And we have to bring them in. There's relocation costs and housing costs, travel costs. So
but could the job be done without these? Because my thought would be no. How do you get something so huge without getting all the expertise you need?
Right. We need a layer of expertise in addition to bringing local people in, younger people in, so they can learn how to execute a project like this.
Here's one: is HART's job to deliver decisions to be considered by the city? I don't know what that means. I'm guessing that what he's saying is that, you said that, this expertise is collected to come up with what they think is a plan or a method or a situation, right? And then it goes to somebody else's hands to get enacted. You're not making laws.
No, we're the implementers here. And, back to this proposed resolution, my concern is really on the timing of it. We have the recovery plan approval pending right now. We've been working very hard on the recovery plan.
Can you update us that a little bit? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I'm a little bit concerned about the timing of changing the governance model or even suggesting to change it right now because we wrote the recovery plan from the standpoint of HART managing the project.
Yeah.
So they're,
through its fruition, right? Through its certain
we're trying
point.
to get that plan approved so the federal funding can start flowing again as soon as possible. And then we also have our procurement going right now for the city center under the P3 model. So we have engaged bidders. They're working very hard right now, putting their bids together, spending lots of money doing so of their own money. So to create uncertainty, because if the resolution,
I'd say that don't they have a position saying, "Hey, wait a minute, we were asked to do this." And
they're going to want to know who's going to manage the project once they, win a contract.
Right.
So if council is going to be deliberating this for a few weeks, if they pass it, then it has to go to the voters at the end of November. That's going to be a long period of uncertainty.
Yeah. And based on that, I'm sure some relationships go asunder when you start say, "Hey, I know that we thought you could come in August, but maybe it's going to be January." Mm-hmm. Isn't this been the big accusation all along? That it's running over and more money and more money.
Right. Yeah. So, that's what we're very focused on is meeting our budget and our schedule from this point forward. And I think we've been doing a good job with that. For the last 2 years, we're on budget, and we're very focused on opening interim service next year.
One of the things that always comes to mind, like I said before, the four famous words in Hawaii are, how much is it? One question is what about after it's completed? Doesn't the federal government expect follow through on the money that they've given to Hawaii? I don't know. How does that work? Obviously, you're getting the money when you dot the I's and cross the T's on the job. But what about afterwards? Don't they also care who's going to run this?
Oh, without a doubt. And, they're already looking at our plans for operational readiness. Mm-hmm. That's a HART responsibility, and we're working very closely with the city to get ready for operations and then make sure we have a good operations plan in place.
I know a lot of people, when you drive by a new building or something that says hiring or hiring soon, how much does HART have to do banking for the future to have people know who are going to be working at the city end of what jobs are going to have to be done? In other words, the city doesn't necessarily have that expertise right now, I don't think, or do they?
Well, what HART is responsible for the operational readiness, and we're working with our major contractor, Hitachi.
Yep. It's built. Here's the operating manual. Here's the parts.
We have to write all the manuals, all the plans, the spare parts plan, make sure all of that is in place, tools, equipment. Yeah. And now we've brought the city in. We're working very closely with them because they're going to oversee the actual operation.
You know what? I got to ask you this because you've worked on both sides of the street. I was talking to a friend of mine in the car business, and one of the things that he said that they hate to tell people, here's a box of parts that you're going to need because you're thinking, wait a minute, I'm paying you $50,000 for this car. I don't want any parts ever. I want you to fix the thing. Yeah. Isn't it true that what you need to do is based on experience and anticipation, you can almost plan for some of the fatigue some of this equipment's going to go through?
That's exactly what we're doing with the P3. Yeah. We're not only planning all of the operations and maintenance requirements, which is labor, materials, spare parts, plans, all of that, but we're also planning in the capital asset replacement over the next 30 years. So whatever, as the assets start to wear down, maybe we have to replace the seats after 15 years on the train.
Yeah, who would have thought about that? Here's another one. Here's another one. It says, Bobby wants to know, what about how much paint do they have to get for the graffiti? I don't mean to laugh at it, but in some respects, from what you told me, I remember in previous meetings, some of that's been taken in account as far as what kind of finishes are put on some of these places in the first place.
Right. So, for example, on the support columns or the piers for the guideway, there are
a million of them,
there's
right?
an anti-graffiti paint there.
Wow,
Maybe I shouldn't talk too much about that, but we've already thought about that.
But look, this is based on everybody, isn't it, Andy? Everybody gearing together for some of the whack jobs, no matter where they are.
But we're also giving the P3 partner who will be involved in operating and maintaining this system the responsibility to remove graffiti, because the key is once graffiti appears, it should be removed right away.
And by the way, aren't there any number of examples in other areas where sometimes it's very good and sometimes it's horrible?
Well, think to all the movies in the 80s about New York City subway with the trains just covered with graffiti.
When you take a look at them now, it's not the case.
Well, what happened is a new director came into New York, I think in the early 90s, and he said, I'm going to take all the trains out of service if they have graffiti. I don't care if there's no service. And he was able to get control over it that way.
Okay, my gang, it's your turn. You want to join the conversation? Easy. 1-833-296-TALK or the Mike Buck Show at gmail.com.
Phone lines are open at 1-833-296-TALK. That's 1-833-296-8255. Or email us at themikebuckshow@gmail.com. Now, back to Mike on AM 690 and FM 94.3. The Answer.
Okay, so rolling on down the road is what we're doing here. And I'm fascinated by the amount of twists and turns that we've taken in all of these projects. And as you know, just before the news, we were talking about the City Council Chair, Ikaika Anderson, putting forth a measure that he wishes to go on the ballot when we vote down the road on the dissolution of HART. Now, obviously, if that did happen, it would be probably no easy task. I mean, obviously, there have been years of a relationship. Somehow or some way, that baton is going to get passed anyway, don't you think?
Right. Well, the resolution suggests a transition period, which would have to happen, of course. Right.
And so when that happens, I mean, it's not as though anybody didn't expect it. I know that when somebody loses an election, we've done this a lot before. If somebody is terming out, they're probably going to be a little bit nicer to the guy coming in than if somebody hoses you in an election and you have to go out the door and he has to come in the door. Has this been the case in projects like this? I mean, obviously, you've been in places where the outgoing person didn't live on good stead and they needed to hire somebody to come in and fix it, which is in some respects similar to what's happening here. Is that an expectation of leadership?
That there be a transition that. Yeah, well, I came into a situation where the project was not necessarily in the greatest shape.
Wasn't on track, all that stuff.
Right. So starting, I think, when Mr. Murthy came in for the interim period right before me, I think he started to make some really valuable structural changes that I was able to advance. And, for 2 years now, we've maintained our budget. We're living within our means and we're meeting our schedules. And I think that's the key is really to hit our objectives and show people that we can improve the project. One of the frustrations I have, if there's any, is that, people don't think things can ever get any better. The problem.
We're so pessimistic sometimes.
The project, of course, had a lot of difficulty in the early years, but, I would suggest things are better. And I realize it takes a while for people to really understand
What about the difference, and I don't know if you've encountered this before, I'm sure the answer is yes, I just don't know how, and that is the considerations that people have that, there are more things here than meet the eye with regards of who has to be negotiated with a project this big, particularly on the cultural side of things. And I knew that you got ramped up on that and you know what's going on that. Is that an element that is sometimes not present in other projects?
Yes, and we have a host culture here, and We have other stakeholders like the Navy, the military, and so we have a responsibility to consult with all of these partners and make sure that we're meeting all of our obligations in terms of environmental requirements and things like that.
I mean, and that probably was given to you in a big folder in the very beginning. Here's the hot buttons.
Right.
Yeah.
Has
it changed since you took over? I mean, do you find that people are out there either reacting to or asking a more sophisticated or accurate set of questions or opinions?
Yeah, I think so, especially out west now that, the project is in the testing phase now, and people, that the roads are being restored and the guideway is now up. Yes, I think people are really starting to anticipate the actual service.
Here's one, and it's sort of paraphrased, but I know the gist of it. I do know that there were businesses along the route that got affected. Mm-hmm. I know that there are some that are still getting affected. Was there a program put into place where some of these people would be eased through the problem?
Yes. Our public involvement group works very hard with the businesses to make sure that we can do everything possible to help them during the construction phase.
I did hear one thing, by the way, in the favor of HART, and that was that there was this one property owner that was chastised for misrepresenting to his tenants what the story was. He guaranteed them, no access, not going to be a problem, when in many respects people had to change their way of getting into this shop or that shop because you just couldn't cross that line anymore.
Right.
And from what I understand, that was lengthy. At what point in time will the surface roads be readdressed now that the project is basically done?
Well, that's already happening, out in the Eva area. We're repaving.
Yeah, by the way, that is, could you explain to people, is that one of the prereqs about being able to do the job, that you're going to restore the road when you're done busting it up?
Well, of course. We can't just leave it the way it is.
Well, you said something earlier that maybe could use better addressing, and that is, I guess now the city and the county and the utilities and everybody, forced on necessity, are trying to work with each other so that you don't get a road dug up every 6 months.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So if we're in there, we coordinate, and there are other projects going on. For example, sewer work, and so we definitely have the ability to coordinate, and make sure we're not disrupting the community more than we need to.
Okay, I got one, and this is based just on me. You said earlier that one of the offshoots of this is going to be the beauty factor, and that is a lot of the overhead power lines are going to not be overhead anymore. They're going to be going away. But does that also work into the plan of who's paying for that? I mean, obviously, right now we've taken a look at HECO wanting to look at our meters and see what size meter we have as far as what group we belong, what suffering group we belong with. Isn't that a part of it, that HART has to come to their aid and say, all right, some of this is going to be on us?
Right. Well, I think in general, HART, will be paying the bills to relocate utilities so that we can build our guideway.
Yeah, and is that another one of the many things that the experts that you've been tapping to be on the board have to come up with rationalization and accurate numbers?
Exactly, and I think we're also offering some benefits here, because if we have a 90-year-old water pipe that we have to move, we don't relocate that pipe; we replace it with a new pipe. So, there's a lot of money being spent on utility relocations, but I think at the end of the day, there will be benefits for the community. as well.
I know that in past times that we've been able to ask you about different projects that you've been working on. It seems to me that you mentioned earlier, back in the day, New York and everything else, some of these systems have been underground for decade after decade after decade, and ours aren't because we haven't had one yet. So is it safe to assume that it's going to be a long time before we need big maintenance?
Well, maintenance is an ongoing thing, but I think the capital asset
replacement, not maintenance, replacement.
Typically, around the 10-year mark, 10 to 15-year mark is when you start to see some replacements are needed. But if you can budget for them now, and anticipate it, rather than saying 15 years from now, we'll worry about it then.
Has anybody ever asked you what happens to the old ones? I mean, did they get used somewhere else?
The old...
the old ones that you replace. Or the reason why there's this big boneyard, I guess, of airplanes in the Mojave Desert. Yeah. Thousands of them. Yeah. So somewhere there must be thousands of choo-choo trains somewhere. But I mean, seriously, obviously, planned obsolescence is what you have a big lesson in, right?
You have to take all of that into account and keep the system running according to performance standards over the years.
And you also mentioned, and we very early in the piece, somebody said, "What's the difference between Ansaldo and Hitachi?" Yeah. Good question. What is the difference?
Yeah, Ansaldo is an Italian company that had won the contract for what we call our core systems, providing the trains and the controls. And Hitachi essentially acquired Ansaldo. Yeah. So they've now changed their name, and it's called Hitachi Rail. So the Ansaldo name basically has been phased out at this point.
What about the Ansaldo name here in Hawaii? Is that gone too?
Right. Yeah, they now call themselves Hitachi Honolulu Joint Venture.
What's coming up this week outside of looking down the road to something coming up on the ballot and down the road, whenever that is? What's going on this week?
At HART, we just continue forward, planning for the interim operations for next fall. Continue to work on our airport contract.
Yeah, there you go.
But we also have our town hall meeting coming up tomorrow. I was saving the best till last. Where's that going to be? Yeah, let me just pull that up real quick here. It's going to be at the Oahu Veterans Center on Kukila Street. Okay. In the Salt Lake area. And the doors open at 6. The meeting will get underway at 6:30. So Oahu Veterans Center. Yep, we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks, Andy. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.